choose your own adventure as we really get into like what it means to take that next step in owning your faith. Okay, and so here's what I want to start with. Okay, think of some of your closest friends. Ah, that was cute. That was cool. Man, you all look. You're good friends. But yeah, think of some of your closest friends. Now, think of what are some of the adventures or things that you would like to do with those friends, or maybe some of the things you have done. Like, for example, one thing that I have done is with a couple of my friends, I've done a road trip. Okay, road trip. Or another way I hang out with my friends is I play board games. Okay, what about you guys? What are some ways that you spend time with your friends, or that you would like to spend time with your friends?
Hiding bodies.
Huh? Did you just say hide dead bodies? All right,
Oh,
hide.
I said hiding bodies.
I know mine.
What?
We could be playing hide and seek.
Basketball?
You don't know.
Oh, you got your best friend right there. Okay, so basketball. Okay, there's one. All right.
He's the
We went to
manager
camp
for the
together
DNC
and
boys
survived.
basketball team. He's the
Okay, that's
and didn't
good.
end up sick of each other, so
Okay, so go to camp.
yeah.
Go to camp together. Spend like a vacay almost, like vacay together.
What level of stupidity do you want me to say?
Dude, whatever you like to do.
The purest
Anthony's not here, so I mean, yeah.
Okay. Give me 5 minutes. I need to think of one. There's so many stupid things.
Well, okay, I'm gonna throw one out just for. Can I throw one out for you? Video games. That's something you like to do with friends, right? Okay. So video games. Anything else?
Did you write hide bodies?
Okay, I'm gonna write hide bodies.
Like hello, hide and seek is a game.
Okay. Hide and seek. That would have been a good interpretation of that. All right. What else? Yeah.
train together.
Train.
Yeah,
Like workout, train. Yeah, sure.
or martial arts training.
Okay, all right. So
whatever
workout or train together, better one another. Sure. Sleepovers.
I like it.
Eating good food, going out to eat. Me, I know you got one yet because I'm about to.
Going to each other's houses to watch the Super Bowl.
Okay. Anything else?
Movies. Annoying your classmates.
Hello, we're
Okay, movies.
shopping.
Shopping.
Boys don't do shopping.
I
have
like
you met
thrift
Brandon?
shopping. I like saving money.
Yeah, you see these? You see these?
One does
You're
not
the
dress
only
like
boy
that.
that
Okay.
shops in here.
Okay.
I'm not a big shopper.
right.
Annoying our fellow classmates. Like
Okay.
we get so crazy and chaotic that they get sick of us and tell us to shut up, but we don't. It's one of my favorite things.
So all these things that we like to do with our friends. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff up here, right?
Make sure you get a picture of it to see if anyone notices that it says hide bodies.
Gosh. Okay, so but how about this? Okay, let me take this a step further.
Oh my.
How about what did I miss?
What's so funny?
Okay, I'm moving on. Okay. But how about I take this a step further? I'm gonna take a step further and go. Okay, I'm gonna choose one thing up here. All right, and that's the only way from this night forward that you can hang out with your friends.
Oh my god.
Okay, so here I'm gonna.
Please.
Please let it be dead bodies.
Okay, we all have to. This is the only way you can hang out with your friends.
Oh god.
Board games. All right, that's the only thing you can do. The only thing, right?
I would have been dead.
Sure, basketball's a lot more fun.
And honestly, this is what I really like. So I think that you would all really like that, and that's the way that you should hang out with your friends, and that's the way that you're going to grow best with your friends. So from now on, that's all you can do. The only thing you can do is play board games. Does that sound like a good
Gotta
deal?
work through
No.
that competition.
Unless it's the
No.
Harry
No, but
Potter.
this is all you can do. This is all you can do.
What?
That's
Yeah.
more. That's it.
Nope, not
This is-
doing
For
it. I quit.
dates.
I
Oh,
quit.
no.
You quit being friends.
So we can do
No,
We
it's
go
not
big.
that. I just quit
Okay,
doing that challenge.
here's why I start here, okay? Because of course, there's many different ways that you guys hang out with your friends, right? Like there's all different ways that you hang out in different ways. I hang out in different ways. Many different ways that we will hang out with our friends. And I would say this is the same way that our relationship with God or the adventure that we get to have with God works as well. This is the way adventures work. This is the way how relationships work with God. If we all did the same thing every day over and over again, I don't think our friendships, let alone our relationship with our Creator, would feel much like an adventure. And so here's where I kind of want to start tonight as we get into this series called Choose Your Own Adventure, is that the reason it's titled this is because you've been invited on an adventure. You've been invited into an adventure with God. And so this month, when we go through this series, we're going to talk about this series these next 2 weeks, and then we'll take a break for winter retreat. Let's go. And then we're going to have 2 more weeks of this. But this whole month that we're going to be talking about this is because you've been invited on an adventure. And this is an adventure, I would say, of a lifetime. It's anything but boring, and the vibes are pretty good. The vibes are pretty amazing. And so the adventure you've been invited on is this journey of knowing, loving, and following Jesus. And the person inviting you on this adventure is your Creator, the God who made you and knows you better than anyone. But as I say that, maybe some of you guys agree with that. Maybe I know, like most of us in this room, maybe you actually, you're like, okay, that makes sense, Brandon. But this question comes up, right? I don't know if for you, it definitely would have been, it's been for me, is, okay, how do I really do that? How do I spend time with God? How do I spend time with God? Because it's kind of easier to name all these things because these are friends that we hang out with day to day, and they're physically in front of us. But how do we spend time with an invisible God? For some of you, maybe you've been at a point where it doesn't make sense. How do we talk and spend time with a God we can't see? How are we supposed to connect with someone we physically can't hang out with? We know how to spend time with our friends, but how do we spend time with God? But the problem with this is, okay, so I'm going to leave, is a lot of times the answers, at least that I got to this question of how do I spend time with God, and maybe you have as well, is the way most people answer that question. Okay, so let me start here, and some of you might have some different ways, but what would you say are the most common ways that you would spend time with God?
Praying.
Okay, praying. What would most people say is this is how you spend time with God?
Bible study.
Bible study?
Oh, wait. Reading the Bible.
Okay, or reading. Just like reading the Bible.
Sunday church. Like grown up church.
Church.
Then youth church.
And youth group.
Writing letters to God to help you feel better if you're having
So like a prayer journal.
Yeah, prayer journal. Yeah,
Okay.
like
Music.
that.
Okay, and this all is, I would almost expect these type of answers, right? Like I would expect to hear most of these things: prayer, Bible study, reading your Bible, going to church, youth group, prayer
Music.
journal, huh?
I said music.
Music, like worship music or music in general.
I'm Christian music.
See, but the thing with when I read these is that most people we know would say these things, right? Like they're like, go to church or pray or read the Bible. But the ways that we spend time with our friends is unique. And I would argue that the way we spend time with God should be unique as well. And so I can tell you all about the different ways I spend time with God, but where I want to go to tonight is looking at one specific person and the way he spent time with God as an example to us. And so we're going to go to Luke 5, okay? So if you guys want to jump to Luke 5. And again, Luke is this book written by a guy named, Mason, what do you think?
Luke.
Yeah, it was written by a guy named Luke. And he wanted to give an account of all the things that happened with Jesus and give an accurate account. So he's telling us these stories about Jesus. And in Luke 5, we're going to read verse 16, and we look at one of the ways in which Jesus spent time with God. But as you read through Luke 5, you kind of see what's going on. It talks about one day Jesus was preaching on the shore in the Sea of Galilee, and these great crowds pressed around him. And when he had finished speaking, he called different people, and he's talking to all these different people and preaching to them. People are coming around him. This guy named Peter, who he calls to be his disciple, is there, and he calls him to follow him, and he heals. And then it goes on, and he heals a man with leprosy, and then he heals a paralyzed man, and then he calls Matthew to follow him later in the scriptures. But right here in verse 16, in the middle of all this, in the middle of him doing his ministry, we get a glimpse of how Jesus spent time with God. And I'm gonna start in 15 just to kind of give some context. But it says, despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and to be healed of their diseases. And then right at the end of that it says, but Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. Okay, Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. And so we see Jesus in the midst of his ministry, he was finding a way to spend time with God the Father. And so he's getting away and doing that. And the Gospels tell us Jesus did this pretty often. Okay, so now I need your guys' help. I want you to do something for me. Okay, again, we just read this verse. Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. But where I need your help is if you guys can for me, if someone will, grab your Bible, and will someone take this one for me? Matthew 14:13. Okay, Morgan. So that's on page 587. Okay?
Alrighty.
And then, hold on. And then we have Mark 135. Okay, who wants to grab that one?
I can.
Okay, Amy's got it. That's on page 600. Mark 14:32. We got two more. You got it? Okay, Mason's got it. And then one more is Luke 6:12 through 13, page 617. Who's got it? Thank you, Cassie. All right. So Morgan, I'm assuming by now you have Matthew 14:13.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and read it to us.
As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns.
So he went on a boat and went away to be alone. Right? Is that what it said? Okay. Middle of nowhere. Okay, who had Mark 135?
Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray.
Out to an isolated place to pray. Mason, you got that? The next one, Mark 14:32.
Yep.
Okay, verse 32. They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus said, sit here while I go and pray.
Okay. So here will I go and pray. So he went off again. And what's our last one, Cassie? Luke 6:12 through 13.
Is one day, soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. At daybreak, he called together all of his disciples and chose 12 of them to be apostles.
Okay, so again, you see him going off to pray. And so in this, you see Jesus starting his day with God. He ends his day with God, and he spent time with God when he was worried or mourning. And so in these different ways, he's spending time with God. He's getting away. He's making time to spend time with God. And Jesus also modeled this for his disciples, these people who are following with them, and he prays with them. All throughout the scriptures, you see him praying with them. There's even points that are talked about in Matthew, Mark, and Luke where they ask him, how do we pray? How do we spend time with God? And so the scriptures are telling us that he went off to pray. And so then the question you might have, okay, so wait, is that it? Is that how we spend time with God, is just by praying? Because that's what Jesus did. Is that what we're supposed to do? Is praying in silence by yourself the way to spend time with God? It's one way. But what if Jesus didn't pray in silence and solitude because it was the one and only way to spend time with God? What if he prayed this way because it was the best way for him to connect with God? I mean, if you really think about it, if you read throughout the scriptures, and we don't have much account from before he started his ministry, those 30 years leading up to when he started, and people started following him, and things are written about him. But if you think about it, he's surrounded by people all the time. And so one of the best ways for him to spend time with God, I would imagine, would be to get away and be alone. And so for Jesus at least, and in one of the examples that he gives us, this is how he connects with God. But what if I told you that silent, solitary prayer isn't the only way to spend time with God? It is a way, and it's one that Jesus modeled for us. But then even being God himself, there was many ways that he spent time with the people around him in a unique way. And so Jesus is our example of how to spend time with God. He's our example. But there are many other ways to spend time with God. And I think one thing that Jesus constantly modeled is the uniqueness of that, and how he did it, and the way he showed it to others, and how we can do it. And so I could stand up here and tell you, like, hey, this is how I spend time with God, which I have ways of my own that are very unique to me, but I wanted some of you to share with us. And so a couple of you, I asked you this week, like, hey, would you be willing to share a unique way that you spend time with God? And I would love for you guys to hear that, because there are unique ways. There are ways that we can connect with God in our own unique way that will connect us to him and develop our relationship with him. And so, Manuel, would you mind going first? Because yours is awesome, dude. I want to. So I'm going to sit down. Manuel, you can come up here, and he's just going to take a couple seconds to share one of the ways that he spends time with God.
Oh, right. So basically, whenever I listen to Christian music, my brain tends to focus less on the lyrics themselves and just like picture what's actually going on like deeper within the song. So like with one of the songs for worship, when I can't remember what line it was, but like something about Jesus' kindness. So like I can picture like a horizon, and then I'm just sitting there on the ground, and then as Jesus like I can like, so like it's kind of like particles of me are like kind of disappearing in a way, and as Jesus comes down and like asks like lends his hand to me, I can like feel myself kind of piecing back together one by one as I start to grab his hand closer and closer. And once I do grab his hand and get up, there's like a light that shines like over there, and then it's just the gateway to heaven, and then I just walk with him there.
That's really cool. That's cool. Can we just give it up for sharing? So that's one unique way. Thank you for sharing, Manuel. Thank you for sharing that. And Hannah, you said you would share tonight too, and so share with us what's one unique way that you spend time with God.
So one way that I found, like I didn't really figure this out until I was more like in my teenage years, but kind of growing up, I was kind of told like what Brandon said, like these are the ways that you spend time with God, and I kind of felt like it never was really working for me the way that I wanted it to. And so then like once I got into like middle school and high school, I started volunteering a lot, especially like in the church and in a church setting, and that's kind of where I found that I could connect with God by kind of not rather by going out and telling people about it, but rather by showing people like through being kind and through teaching them that way by what I do rather than by what I say, because the Bible tells us that like we can shine God's light by by being kind to others and showing them the way, and not just doing things like for ourselves basically.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Can we give it up for Hannah, please? I see we're all to the golf clap this evening. But here's what I yeah, right. Here's what I think is so cool about that, and I relate with both of those. Music's a big one for me. I found as I've continued to serve too, like and I'm sure each of you, if we all went around the room and all of you said, I'm willing to share, there would be a uniqueness that came to that. Because even as I really enjoy music, like what you shared, Manuel, is something very different than what I've necessarily experienced, or the way that I connect with God through music. It's unique to me, and that's unique to you. And you serving, Hannah, is unique to you. And so Jesus is an example who shows us that spending time with God is important. Okay? Don't miss that. He shows us that spending time with God is important. All throughout his ministry, he took time, and this blew my mind the first time I realized this, like he took time to get away. There was times where the crowds were around, or he was with his disciples, and he goes, you know what, I need to make time for God. And so he's our example that that's important. But we have been given freedom. You guys have been given freedom. And as Manuel and Hannah just shared, we've been given freedom to get to know God more closely in our own unique way. You have the freedom to figure out how you best connect with God. You don't have to connect with God the way your parents do. You don't have to connect to God the way I do, or the way your friends do, or the way the rest of this fam, our fam does. When it comes to knowing God, it's like you get to choose your own adventure. Because there isn't one way to connect with God. There isn't one way to connect with God. And here's why I think this is so important, okay? And why I wanted to start here this week is that knowing God is an adventure, not a formula. Not a formula. And I think that's so important to realize, because a lot of times we just want the answer. We want like the formula, like, hey, how do you do that? How did you grow in that? And we want like this like piece by piece, this is what you should do, like a recipe or an equation. And it's not like that. I mean, think of any of your friendships. If I went back to here and said, this is the way I spend time with my friends, this is the way you need to do it, that might not work for you. And it's no different in our relationship with our Creator. Let me put it this way, okay? And then I'm almost done. Let me share one last thing that I kind of want to point out to you guys. This right here is a mountain called Half Dome. Okay? It's a famous rock climbing destination in Yosemite National Park, California. It's beautiful, right? I mean, just looking at that, I'm sure if we were like right in front of it, it would be really phenomenal. Okay? But it's majestic, but it's also very difficult to climb. It's a very difficult climbing spot. It's a big climbing destination. A lot of climbers go there and try to tackle it, and if you do, that's a pretty big deal. Okay? But as recent as the 1870s, climbing it was thought to be impossible. People just didn't do it. It was like, no, you can't do that. But thousands of people now climb it each year. And you'd think, since it took so long to get up this mountain, like people would begin to find, like you'd find one way. And everybody's just like, okay, that's the way to do it. You have to go up this way, and then over here, and then, and there's this one way to do it. There's this super secret path that someone found, and now all of us do it. But that's not the way it goes. There are hundreds of paths to the top of Half Dome. And I think that's part of the appeal of people continuing to climb it. Right? Like if one person found this one way to get to the top, as beautiful and as majestic as this is, if there was one way and then they climbed it and it was like, okay, that's it. Like it would kind of lose some of that majesticness. It would kind of lose some of that beauty, that grandeur. Right? But there's hundreds of different ways, and people continue to climb it and continue to marvel at it because it becomes unique to each person who goes up it. And this is exactly what spending time with God, I would say, not exactly, I mean, it's a metaphor, but like in the same way, that's how we spend time with God. It's unique to you, and that uniqueness, it's what gives it its beauty, the time, or the majesticness, or splendor, or whatever you want to call it, or awesomeness, or, that's what gives our time with God such an amazing thing for each of us. It's these differences in the way we spend time with God that make each of the relationships we have. It's the differences that make the relationships that we have with others and the relationship that we have with God so beautiful, majestic, and powerful. Right? Like, I mean, if you even really think about it, the people that you spend time with, it's become unique to you. Your friends, Morgan, the way you hang out with Hannah is probably different than the way another friend would hang out with Hannah. And so you guys have your own unique relationship. Right? And it's no different with our Creator. It's no different. And so I wanted to end here because if you think about spending time with God is about finding the one right way to connect, you're going to think about it like a formula, and it's going to become monotonous, it's going to become rigorous, and it's going to become, honestly, probably kind of boring. But your relationship with God isn't a formula to get right. It's an adventure that you get to be on.